Why do people love stories so much? And I'm going to confess that I'm no exception. You know, as a young boy, I remember sitting in the mosque on a Friday and listening to the Sheikh speaking. And I remember we had a very talented Sheikh when that I recall, could really tell a story. And I remember being mesmerized for 5 or 10 minutes when he went into a story and he took us with him in that story. And the fulfillment we got out of these Friday stories in the mosque. But not just there, I've been to a Shia center or to various Shia functions and even some Sufi Barelvi functions. And the power of the story is indescribable. The way stories or narratives of history are narrated or recited, and how the audience goes, the members of the audience go on that journey with the storyteller. And we're so used to the story, to the narrative, that it's almost ingrained. It's part and parcel of our experience of being a Muslim. And really, if you take the story out of the mosque or out of the Shia commemoration or out of the Barelvi Sufi occasion, out of the Maulud event, it, it becomes dry. It becomes devoid of any feeling. And there's a reason for that. Stories are supposed to evoke an emotion. Stories work on our emotion. There's no secret that the story takes you on a journey, it has a climax, and then it resolves the tension that the story sets up and creates. But the problem with the story is also that it can create a reality that is not congruent or in agreement with the actual real world. And often a story can create a reality that is sort of fictitious, that is a dream reality, that is an imaginary reality. But the power of those stories the power of stories, the appeal, the emotional appeal, makes those stories relatable. It makes those stories to be almost like realistic to the human mind. Which is why I want to raise this issue, because we're living in a time when the power of the story is at an all-time high. Have you ever heard the word narrative? I'm sure you've seen the word narrative. And the modern narrative is a modern version of the ancient storyteller. And what happens is that the feelings of belonging, the feeling of camaraderie, the feeling of who we associate with are engendered in those stories. At the same time, the feelings of who we should dislike and who we should fear and who we should be suspicious of are also engendered and inculcated in those modern day narratives, just as were the olden days. The evil monsters, the brave warriors, the dragon slayers, the heroic members of the tribe. Today, similarly at the global level and using the modern power of the narrative, those same objectives are met. So with these modern day narratives, you are very subliminally being conditioned into positioning yourself in terms of enemies and friends. And of course, the most powerful narrative or the most powerful framework or platform today would be the Western media or cultural platform. It would be the storytellers of Hollywood. It will be the storytellers of CNN, the storytellers of BBC. And these writers who put together the articles, whether it's fiction or non-fiction, and because we must remember that storytelling is storytelling. That it could be fully fiction, it could be fantasy, it could be news fiction. And what they are interested in is putting together, cobbling together a narrative, a story that will be consumed by the world. And the end result of that story, or those many numerous narratives coming out of Hollywood, coming out of BBC, coming out of the drama channels or the reality channels, or out of the news channels, they all reinforce one thing, and that is a particular benevolent view, or the assumption of the benevolence of Western civilization, the benevolence of Western big business, the benevolence of the ultra rich or the super elite within the West. And you'll agree with me that the narrative is based on massaging that understanding for the innocent listener to those stories. Now, I want to combine this discussion by appealing to 2 points or 2 areas of danger. The one is that we always on this channel, I always point out to you the dangers of Hadith. Because Hadith is such a created, grand or intermeshed system of narratives that the Hadith literature has constituted in the past, in the history of the Muslims, such an intermeshed set of narratives that has created an understanding of the world. Now, if you get the Hadith pertaining to the Sunni school, then the grand narrative or the intermeshed narrative there has enforced certain basic understandings or some certain basic ideas, and that is, for example, the supremacy or the nobility of the Salaf, of the Sahaba, and the general, without exception, nobility of all members of that fraternity. When you look at the Shia narrative, and it is captured or conveyed through the series or set of intermeshed narratives of the Shia, then it will present the victim status of the family of the Prophet and those who followed them, the persecution, the sad killing of some of the key personalities, and the and the solidarity that has been forged in the aftermath of those massacres and murders of the families. And so it uses a victim solidarity as the core thrust of the many narratives. The Sunni narrative will, I think, at its heart is a narrative of don't rock the boat, be satisfied, don't question the details, go for unity, respect power, and by all means do not question those who are in authority. So those are the general ideas, the general narratives, that one can discern from Hadith literature. And I've already mentioned to you, like, Hadith is a form of narrative construction. It is the construction of a narrative. Modern day news, drama, Hollywood, etc., emanating from the West is also a form of narrative construction. And so often we as Muslims, we have to, as people who are interested in liberating ourselves from being unduly influenced or become the victims of an influencing operation or become the victims of a gaslighting operation, we have to sit up and not become emotionally compromised in the face of these narratives being directed at us, or in the face of these narratives being beamed at us, whether it is Hadith or whether it is the Western media, the mainstream media, because these are all narratives that are aimed at getting you emotionally invested. The big problem is that no sane and no rational person will make decisions based on the emotional experience or the emotions. I mean, if you are going to look at a moment's happiness or a moment's sadness or just fear, short-term irrational fears on which to base your decisions, then you will fail at life, unfortunately. I mean, that's just a fact, that you will fail at life. If you are afraid unduly or irrationally at certain decisions, for example, if you're afraid that you'll catch a disease if you go to school or to university, or there's an irrational fear to go out and earn a living, you will unfortunately stagnate and you will be unable to survive in the real world. So we cannot be driven or directed in our behavior by a narrative or by emotions, because that is really what the narrative does. The narrative plays on our feelings, the conclusion. How does this part of the story make you feel? Now I'm going to give you a very tangible example of how the narrative is reinforced in the Western media. And what I did was I just did a very simple exercise. I went to YouTube and I just typed in, I want to contrast two narratives, right? How the story is being beamed at me. Now, YouTube is part and parcel of the Western mainstream influencing operations, right? So it's maybe not as obvious as CNN or BBC, but in terms of the way the algorithm is written, the way in which the message is prioritized, clearly there will be. So in terms of prioritization of the message, I think the easiest thing is just to do a simple search. And what I did was, I did a simple search and I typed in explain the Russia-Ukraine conflict. Just type that in on YouTube. And then I also typed in explain the Israel-Palestine conflict, right? So I did a similar search for two narratives. And then it's a very simple exercise. I just used the top video that came top of my recommended list. And within the Russia-Ukraine conflict, let me show you what appears. What is the top video that appears? Take a look at this for a minute or so and I'll...
Мною принято решение о проведении специальной военной операции.
I just want you to pay attention to the music. It's ominous music. The visuals there also were rather... you had a foreign language, right? You had a strange Russian language. You
О
were hit by the
проведении
Russian
специальной военной операции.
Putin called this a special military operation, but it's clear this is a full-scale invasion.
All right, so also we get a personalization of the conflict around the name Putin. And the wording chosen.
Была паника, истерика, слезы.
Как у нас пламя было выше дома.
We're like in a cell.
Right, the devastation, the showing of females, young women reflecting innocence, and the devastation. Now let's just quickly move to the Palestinian narrative, how that narrative is conveyed for you, and you tell me what you think.
Few struggles in history have combined territorial disputes, religious divides, and geopolitical rivalries like...
Right, immediately after the explosion, the music has become calm, and the voice is also English, and the voice is not in any way aggravated.
Few struggles in history have combined territorial disputes, religious divides, and geopolitical rivalries like the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Altogether, Israel and the Palestinian
So
territories are the size of Maryland
what
and
is
have a
happening
population of
is
about
you are being taken through a more calmer and a more thought through explanation of the of the conflict. And then immediately after showing obviously this map here of how Israel has grown, it moves on
goods
then
into Gaza.
to
Since
identifying
2007,
villains.
Gaza has been controlled by Hamas, an Islamist organization with a militant wing that is considered a terrorist group by many in the international community. Every few years,
So the violence now is not as with Putin's war. The victim, the aspects or the elements of the victim are the innocence of the white blonde girls. On the other conflict, the victim side is being portrayed as these black masked men with worn out AK-47 rifles.
years since, conflict has erupted, with civilians on both sides paying the price.
And then the civilians on both sides. So the recognition that this is a balanced conflict that we need to look at in a critical way. And let's just watch another bit.
Since 2000, more than 7,000 Palestinians have been killed in conflict with Israelis. More than 1,000 Israelis have died.
So clearly what I want to show you here is that you are not being given information, facts, reality. What you are given is the facts, but the facts incorporated into a story. So a selection of facts which are then used as props within the manufacturing of a story. So within the one story, the Russia-Ukrainian conflict, there is almost no ambiguity. You are not left to judge who is evil and who is good, who's the victim and who's the perpetrator. Very, very clearly so. And if you've been watching the news, you'll know what I'm talking about. With the Palestinian conflict, you are being told that this is a complex matter. It goes back many centuries, and it goes back, in fact, to biblical times. And the simplicity of both countries, or both Palestine and Ukraine, being under occupation or being the subject of a military intervention or a military conquest is not really highlighted. Now the reason for that is, you see, if the only way you can be recruited for that side, and that is really, you see, the narrative is not there to recruit you to truth or to reality. The narrative is there to recruit you to become a party in the conflict, to take a side in the conflict, and particularly to take the side of the West, to take the side of the US, Europe, Britain, Israel, and those countries who form the NATO alliance and, the North Atlantic Western Alliance, which I may add, within its own ranks, have a lot of liberatory or emancipatory potential and forces. But the power structure there, the power structure of control from the US, from Britain, from the North Atlantic Alliance, really is jockeying not for you to understand the truth of the Palestinian-Israeli conflict, but for you to take their side, for you to disavow the victim in the one case, and to also take the side of Ukraine on the side of the Russia-Ukrainian conflict. So the point I want to leave with you in closing is that what you see in the modern narrative, the dressing up of facts in a story format, and using music, using intonation, using words, using tone, using imagery, all of that is a creation of a narrative for you. And if you're a sucker, if you come onto this earth and you are here to just be guided by your emotions and how you feel, then you will be one of those unfortunate people who will just live and die with your life being meaningless, or the only meaning your life will have will be in service of those who are powerful, those who are making the stories, those who are creating the narratives. You will forever be a slave to those who tell you their stories, and that is how you will die. And unfortunately, you see, the Quran does warn you about this. There is a very clear warning in the Quran that warns us about the stories, where Allah says, A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, Quran 31 verse 6, وَمِنَ النَّاسِ مَن يَشْتَرِي لَهْوَ الْحَدِيثِ لِيُضِلَّ عَنْ سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ بِغَيْرِ عِلْمٍ وَيَتَّخِذَهَا هُزُوًا أُولَئِكَ لَهُمْ عَذَابٌ مُهِينٌ. But there are among men those who purchase idle tales, stories, narratives, without knowledge or meaning, to mislead men from the path of Allah and throw ridicule on the path. For such there will be a humiliating penalty. Let's just quickly. So that, my friends, is how the Quran actually exposes the use of the narrative to emote, to create an emotional response from you. And you know, the Muslims are probably the most naive people on the planet today when it comes to these stories. You know, I've seen Muslims circulate pictures, obvious lies about, you know, mosques that have not been destroyed within the earthquake. And because of the gullibility, you know, it just reinforces their attachment to their religious beliefs, which our religious beliefs are not an emotional decision. It's a rational decision. We are drawn to the beauty and the justice and the harmony of our book, our deen, not because we are emotionally coerced out of fear or out of anything, but because we are rationally drawn to it. And so my call is, and what I'm asking for is that let us be a bit less emotional when we are being gaslit or when we are being aroused emotionally, and let us just look at the facts of these matters before we decide. There are very powerful influencing operations that are at work.